The great arena stood at the center of the alien capital like a monument carved out of stone and tradition. For centuries, it had been the place where disputes were settled, honor defended, and leaders chosen. No matter how powerful a ruler, or how wealthy and noble, the final word always belonged to combat inside that circle. The princess knew this truth well. She had grown up watching her people's warriors win countless battles on her behalf, each victory reinforcing her pride in the power of her house. On this day, the crowd gathered in numbers greater than ever before. The air buzzed with excitement, the sound of drums and alien horns echoing against the arena walls. Nobles sat in high balconies decorated with banners, while common folk pressed close to the lower edges, eager to see who would claim victory. The princess, adorned in fine garments that shimmered with her people's traditional colors, sat in the royal box. Her face was calm and unreadable, but inside, her pride burned with certainty. Her champion, the strongest warrior her world could offer, would crush any who dared challenge him. The challenge had come from an unexpected source, a human. Few had ever seen one before, and fewer still had taken them seriously. To the princess's people, humans were strange, fragile creatures, too soft-skinned, too short-lived, and too unrefined to ever stand against true warriors. The crowd whispered with laughter when the human first stepped forward, wondering if this was some kind of joke. But the human did not look like someone who had come to amuse them. He walked with steady steps, wearing no grand armor, only simple gear suited for survival and combat. His eyes were calm, his movements controlled. He carried himself not like someone who sought glory, but like someone who simply intended to endure. The princess studied him with mild curiosity, convinced his bravery was only foolishness. Her champion entered the arena next, greeted with thunderous cheers. He was massive, armored from head to toe, with a weapon forged from the strongest metals of their world. His roar shook the air, and the people roared back, their confidence matched only by his own. He had never been defeated, not in training, not in battle, and certainly not in the sacred arena. The fight began with a clash of sound. The champion charged, his weapon slicing through the air with speed that belied his size. The human moved, aside just enough to avoid the blow, sand spraying beneath his boots. The crowd gasped, surprised he had even managed to dodge the first strike. The princess narrowed her eyes. Perhaps luck had been on his side. The champion attacked again. This time with greater fury. His strikes came heavy and fast, each one capable of breaking stone. Yet the human did not meet strength with strength. Instead, he used agility, stepping back, ducking low, weaving between the deadly arcs. Each dodge seemed too close. Each movement, timed to the very last instant, as though he could read the champion's intent before it even happened. Minutes passed, and still the human had not fallen. The champion's strikes grew heavier but also slower, his breath coming harder with each swing. Sweat glistened beneath his armor. The human, meanwhile, remained focused, conserving his strength, never wasting emotion. He struck only when the chance was perfect. A quick jab here, a strike at exposed armor there. Small wounds began to appear on the champion, nothing fatal, but enough to draw blood and show weakness. The crowd grew restless. They had expected a swift victory, yet now they murmured in disbelief. The princess's hand tightened on the railing of her balcony. She had watched many battles, and she knew what she was seeing was not luck. This human was fighting with experience, with discipline, with a patience her people often lacked. Finally, the moment came. The champion, desperate to end the fight, raised his weapon high for one final crushing blow. The human did not retreat this time. Instead, he stepped forward, closer than anyone expected, slipping under the swing. With sudden precision, he drove his weapon into the champion's exposed side, finding the weak spot where the armor had loosened from exhaustion. The champion staggered, his roar turning into a cry of pain. The human twisted, pulled back, and the giant fell to his knees. The arena went silent for a heartbeat, and then the impossible happened. The champion collapsed face first into the sand. The fight was over. Gasps and shouts filled the air. Nobles leapt to their feet, eyes wide in disbelief. The common folk screamed, some in outrage, others in awe. The princess sat frozen, her heart pounding as if she herself had been struck. Her champion, her pride, had been defeated by a human. According to the old laws, the outcome was undeniable. Whoever won such a duel did not simply claim victory, they claimed rights. By ancient decree, the one defeated, and all tied to their honor, were bound to serve the victor. It was a rule meant to prevent endless disputes, one that even royalty could not ignore. The princess's maids, standing behind her, exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew what this meant. Their lady, the proud daughter of the ruling line, along with her attendants, now belonged in service to the very human who had just shocked the galaxy. The human did not raise his arms in victory or shout triumphantly. Instead, he simply stood there, breathing hard, his expression calm. He bowed his head once toward the fallen champion, as though giving respect to the defeated. That simple gesture struck the princess more deeply than any boast could have. The drums beat again, announcing the verdict. The herald's voice echoed across the arena, declaring the human the rightful victor, and by law the princess and her maids his to command. The princess rose slowly from her seat, her face a mask of dignity, though her thoughts raged within her. She could not deny the law. She could not undo what had been witnessed by thousands. She, who had never bowed to anyone, would now be forced to stand at the side of a human, a being she had believed beneath her. The crowd continued to roar, half in outrage, half in admiration, as the human looked up at her. Their eyes met for the first time. His gaze was not mocking, not arrogant, but steady, as though he had already accepted the weight of what victory meant. For the princess, it was the beginning of a new path she had never imagined. The arena had grown quiet after the human's victory, but the silence did not last long. Whispers turned into arguments, and arguments into loud debates that spread through the capital like fire. Some nobles refused to accept what they had seen. Others, though shocked, could not deny the ancient law. In the streets, commoners repeated the tale in disbelief, and in taverns, merchants told the story as if it were already legend. The human, unknown just hours ago, was now the center of every conversation. The princess, however, felt no excitement. She returned to her private chambers with her maids, her head held high even as her pride burned inside her. She had been raised to be strong, to be untouchable, the daughter of a line that had never once bowed to an outsider. Now, because of one duel, everything had changed. The law of her people was clear. Defeat in the arena bound not only the champion, but also the honor of the house that champion represented, and in this case that meant herself and her attendants. Her maids were nervous, stealing glances at her as they walked. They had served her since childhood, and though they were loyal, they too were bound by the same law. One whispered, "My lady, perhaps it will not be as terrible as it seems. He does not appear cruel." The princess did not answer. Her pride demanded silence. Inside, though, she felt a conflict she had never known before. She had expected arrogance from the human. She had expected him to boast, to claim his prize with a smile of triumph. But he had shown none of that. He had bowed to her champion, shown respect to the defeated, and accepted his victory with calm dignity. That unsettled her more than if he had gloated. Later that night, the Council of Elders confirmed the result. The human was summoned before them, his simple clothing still marked with dust from the battle. The elders announced the verdict clearly. "By the law of the arena, the princess and her household shall serve you, victor. This is binding, and none may refuse." The human bowed slightly, accepting with no argument, but also with no visible joy. His voice was steady as he replied, "I understand the weight of this law. I will honor it." The princess heard those words and felt a strange twist in her chest. What did he mean by honor it? Did he think he could act as if he had earned her loyalty? Did he believe he was her equal? Her hands clenched at her sides, but she said nothing. To argue would mean defying the ancient laws, and that would bring shame to her name forever. The maids, though, could not hide their relief. One of them whispered later when they were alone, "At least he is not like the other nobles, my lady. Others would have demanded you kneel at once. He only speaks of honor. The princess dismissed the thought sharply. Do not mistake restraint for strength, she replied. But when she was alone, she could not help but replay the fight in her mind. Every step, every calculated move he had made. It was not brute strength that had defeated her champion, but patience and intelligence. He had fought as if he had studied her people, as if he had known exactly what to expect. Days passed and the court continued to whisper. Some nobles mocked her openly, laughing that a princess now stood beneath a human. Others were wary, speaking cautiously, for they had seen the human's skill themselves. Her enemies in the court, those who had long waited for her to stumble, seized the chance to spread rumors that her family's line was weakening. Each whisper was another knife against her pride. The human, however, did not rush to take advantage of his new position. Instead of summoning her or demanding her service immediately, he kept a quiet distance. He trained in the practice fields, spoke little, and seemed to spend much of his time observing the city and its customs. This puzzled her greatly. Any noble of her own kind would have already used such a victory to establish dominance. Why was he waiting? Her maids began to grow curious. They noticed that he greeted them with respect whenever they crossed paths. He did not order them about like servants. Instead, he asked small questions about the city, the traditions, the food. Some of them answered nervously at first, then, with growing ease. Slowly, without realizing it, they began to smile around him, even laugh at his unusual ways of speaking. The princess noticed, and it stung. Each time one of her maids returned with a story of the human's politeness. Her pride hardened. How could they be so easily swayed? Did they not remember who they were? Yet she could not deny the truth. He was unlike any conqueror she had ever imagined. At night she wrestled with her thoughts. Tradition told her she must serve, but her spirit rebelled. She wondered if the law was wrong, if this human was some trick of fate meant to test her. And yet when she remembered the look in his eyes, calm, steady, without cruelty, she felt something she could not name. One evening, her oldest maid approached her quietly. My lady, forgive me, but I must speak. I believe he is not like the others. I believe he could bring change. The princess turned sharply. Change? You speak as if defeat is a blessing. Do not forget what he has taken from us. The maid bowed her head, but her voice was steady. He has taken nothing by force. He won by the law, as our people have always demanded. And yet he shows mercy. That is rare, even among our own. The words lingered in the princess's mind, long after. Mercy was not a trait her people valued in leaders. Strength was, power was. Yet the human, by showing mercy, had shaken her certainty. The palace grew tense in the following days. Nobles sent messages, some mocking, others warning. Rumors spread that challenges would soon be issued to the human. Already rival houses whispered that they would not allow an outsider to hold such a position of honor. The princess knew conflict was coming, and strangely she found herself watching the human more closely, trying to see if he was prepared. She did not speak to him directly, not yet. Her pride would not allow it, but from a distance she studied him. She saw the way he trained, the way he handled small disputes with the guards, the way he moved through the palace without arrogance. Every action of his seemed deliberate, as though he carried a quiet strength that did not need to shout. The more she watched, the more unsettled she became. He was bound by law to receive her service, yet he acted as if he needed nothing from her at all. It was as though he carried his own sense of honor, one that no law could change, and that more than his victory was what troubled her most. The days that followed were unlike anything the princess had expected. She had prepared herself for humiliation, for the human to demand her obedience, to command her as if she were no more than a prize of war. Yet none of that happened. Instead, the human behaved in ways that puzzled not only her, but also her maids and even the palace guards. He did not summon her to kneel before him, nor did he boast about owning her service. He walked the palace halls as though he were merely a guest, not the man who had won one of the greatest victories in the arena's history. The princess waited each morning for the moment he would demand something, but instead, she would hear from her maids that he had spent the day training quietly or exploring the markets of the city. Sometimes he asked them questions about food, language, or customs, but never once did he act as though they were beneath him. Her maids began to relax around him. They discovered he preferred sharing meals with others instead of eating alone. He asked for the same dishes the common soldiers ate rather than demanding royal banquets. When one of the younger maids spilled water while serving him, he did not shout or scold. He only smiled gently and helped her pick up the fallen cup. That simple act shocked them all. The princess noticed the change in her attendants. Their steps became lighter, their voices more cheerful when speaking about him. They whispered among themselves about how strange he was, how different from the nobles they had always served. Some even admitted they felt safer in his presence than with their own kind. This angered the princess, though she did not show it openly. She could not understand how they could forget their pride so easily. To her, serving him was still a chain, no matter how lightly he held it. Yet despite her anger, curiosity stirred within her. She wanted to know why he acted this way. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, she found herself watching him from a distance. He was sitting under the shade of a great tree, speaking with two of her maids. They were laughing softly at something he said. She had never heard those maids laugh so freely before. The sight unsettled her, but she did not turn away. When the conversation ended, the human stood and noticed her gaze. For the first time since the duel, their eyes met outside the arena. He did not bow, nor did he look away. Instead, he simply nodded once in acknowledgement, as though they were equals crossing paths. The princess quickly turned her face aside, hiding the confusion that grew inside her. Soon after, an incident occurred that forced her to see him in a new light. During a formal gathering, a rival noble insulted her openly, mocking her defeat and suggesting she was no longer worthy of her title. The insult stung, and though she kept her composure, her maids lowered their heads in shame. Before she could reply, the human stepped forward. His voice was calm, but firm. She has not lost her worth. She stood by her champion, as tradition demands. It was I who won the duel. If you have words of mockery, speak them to me, not to her. The hall went silent. No one had expected him to defend her. The rival noble sneered but said nothing more. The princess, meanwhile, felt her heart tighten. She was not used to anyone, especially not an outsider, speaking in her defense. For a brief moment, she wondered if perhaps he did not see her as a prize at all. Later that night, she questioned her maids. Why does he act this way? What does he want? One of them answered softly. Perhaps he does not want anything, my lady. Perhaps this is simply who he is. The princess did not believe it at first. Everyone wanted something. Power, wealth, glory. These were the desires of all who fought in the arena. Yet the human showed no sign of such hunger. He trained, he observed, he protected, but he never demanded. Her thoughts grew restless. She began to watch him more closely. She noticed how he carried himself, never slouching, never careless, as though discipline was a part of him. She noticed how he treated her maids with patience, even when they made mistakes. She noticed how he did not mock their customs, but tried to learn them, sometimes clumsy, sometimes amusing, but always sincere. The princess found herself caught between pride and doubt. Part of her wanted to test him, to find a weakness that would prove he was unworthy. Another part of her wondered if perhaps her maids were right. Perhaps he truly was different. One evening, while walking through the training grounds, she paused to watch him spar with soldiers who wished to test his skill. He fought without arrogance, moving with precision and calm, defeating each opponent with efficiency but never cruelty. When a soldier fell, he offered a hand to help them rise. When one of them asked for advice, he gave it without hesitation. The princess listened unseen as he spoke of patience, awareness, and the importance of protecting others before oneself. Those words stayed with her long after she left the grounds. They echoed in her mind, clashing with the lessons she had been taught since childhood. Strength, dominance, and pride had been the pillars of her life. But here was a man who had defeated her champion, who had every right to act as a conqueror, and yet he chose humility and respect instead. Her maids began to change as well. They grew closer to him, not as servants but as companions. They brought him food, shared stories of the palace, and even laughed at his strange human habits. One of them admitted quietly to the princess, "I believe he is honorable. Perhaps more honorable than many of our own." The princess did not reply, but her silence spoke more than words. As days turned into weeks, she realized that the balance of her world was shifting. The human had not forced her loyalty, yet slowly, without demanding it, he was earning something far more powerful: trust. And though she hated to admit it, a part of her was beginning to wonder what it might mean to stand not as his servant, but at his side. The peace of the palace did not last. Word of the human's victory spread far beyond the city, reaching the ears of nobles and warriors who could not accept what had happened. To them, it was an insult that one of their kind's greatest champions had been defeated by an outsider. Challenges soon followed. At first, they came in the form of sharp words during council meetings, nobles questioning the human's right to hold such an honored prize. Then came letters, each one demanding that he face another duel, each one written with the authority of ancient tradition. They argued that his victory had been a fluke, that only by facing more of their warriors could he prove he deserved the place he had been given. The princess heard these whispers every day. Some nobles even approached her directly, urging her to denounce the human and demand a rematch. She refused, not out of loyalty, but because to do so would mean admitting weakness before the court. Still, she wondered what would happen if he lost a second duel. Would she and her maids be free again? Would her honor be restored? The first challenger arrived within a week. He was a seasoned warrior, smaller than her original champion but faster, skilled with twin blades. The duel took place in the arena once more, the same place where the human had first claimed victory. The stands were full, eager for revenge. The human fought with the same patience as before. He dodged the flurry of blades, waiting for the moment his opponent grew careless. Then with one clean strike, he disarmed the warrior and held him at sword's point. The crowd fell silent again, unable to deny what they had seen. More challenges came. Each one ended the same way. Sometimes the human fought with cunning, sometimes with endurance, but always with control. He never humiliated his opponents, never mocked them. He won, and then he offered his hand to help them rise. Slowly, even his enemies began to whisper that perhaps fate had chosen him. The princess watched each duel with a heart full of conflict. Every victory should have pleased her, because it silenced her enemies who mocked her defeat. Yet it also unsettled her, because each triumph seemed to place him further above her in the eyes of her people. She wanted to hate him for it, but she could not. His strength was real, and so was his restraint. One evening, after his fifth victory, one of her maids confessed, "My lady, I believe he fights not to conquer, but to protect. When he looks at you, it is not with pride, but with respect." The princess turned away, unwilling to admit that she had noticed the same thing. But the challenges were not the only danger. A rival, noble house, jealous of the human's growing respect, began to plot in secret. They feared that if he continued to win, the people might begin to see him as a rightful leader, someone who could influence even the council. To prevent this, they devised a plan to remove him quietly, outside the arena, where law could not protect him. The princess learned of the plot through whispers from her spies. At first, she thought of staying silent. If the human fell to an ambush, her chains of law would be broken. Yet something inside her hesitated. She remembered the way he had defended her from insult, the way he treated her maids as people, not servants. He had won her people's respect fairly, not through cruelty, but through honor. That night, she sat alone, struggling with her thoughts. Pride urged her to let fate take its course, but another voice, quieter yet stronger, told her that to remain silent would be dishonorable. When the ambush came, she chose. She arrived with her maids just as the rival nobles' men surrounded the human in the streets. With her own guards, she joined the fight, forcing the attackers to scatter. For the first time, she and the human stood back to back, defending each other. When the battle ended, the human looked at her with surprise, his calm eyes meeting hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he gave a small nod, one of silent thanks. The princess turned away quickly, hiding the strange warmth that rose within her chest. She told herself it was only honor that had guided her decision. Yet deep inside, she knew it was more than that. For the first time, she had chosen to stand not against him, but with him. The princess remained silent, though her thoughts were far from calm. Each time she saw him training, each time she remembered how he had risked himself to save them during the ambush, her heart shifted slightly. He was not a conqueror, not a tyrant. He was something else entirely, something her people had never known. The final test came sooner than expected. A powerful enemy, angered by the humans' rising influence, gathered soldiers and launched a direct attack on the palace itself. The city awoke to the sound of alarms, steel clashing against steel and fire lighting the night sky. The human fought at the front, not from behind walls but among the guards and soldiers, his blades striking with precision. The princess watched, as he shielded those around him, even when he could have stepped aside to save himself. Her maids, terrified yet determined, stayed by her side, but their eyes never left the man who fought for them, as if they were his own people. When the enemy forces breached the inner courtyard, the princess herself was targeted. Arrows rained down, and in the chaos she stumbled. It was the human who reached her first, pulling her to safety, standing firm against the attackers. He fought with a fury she had never seen before, not for pride, not for law, but to protect her. By the end of the night, the palace still stood. The enemy was defeated, their leader captured, their plot destroyed. The city hailed the human not as a foreigner, but as a hero. The princess stood before her people the next day, her heart steady for the first time since her defeat in the arena. She looked at the human, then at the crowd, and made her choice. Prebio, the law of the arena, I was bound to serve him, she declared. But today I stand by him not because of law, but because of choice. He has shown honor, courage, and respect greater than any conqueror. He is no longer only the victor, he is my ally, and by my will I remain at his side. The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in cheer. The council, though divided, could not deny the will of both tradition and the princess. The human bowed, his head slightly, accepting her words with the same quiet dignity he had shown since the beginning. In that moment, the chains of law were no longer chains at all. They had become bonds of trust. The princess looked at him, no longer with resentment, but with a new understanding. He had defeated her champion, but in the end it was not through force that he had won her loyalty. It was through patience, honor, and the simple strength of his character. And as the sun rose over the city, the people whispered of a new era, one where an outsider had not only claimed victory, but had changed the heart of a princess and the future of a world.